Let's talk about rings. Let's talk about rings, baby. You want to go throw this in a volcano somewhere? Yeah, there's a thing. Let's go. The one ring to rule them all. Hello. Welcome to the channel. I am Pete. This is the Ponderings of Pete. And I talk about books. I talk about sci-fi. I mostly talk about fantasy. I talk about some other weird stuff. And literary fiction and some other non-fiction sometimes. I don't know. Random stuff. Today, I'm not going to talk about books, though. I'm going to talk about something tangentially related. And that is the Rings of Power show that Amazon is making. If you like this video and you want to see more, go ahead and like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications, let me know. There's a lot. So let's talk about this. First of all, I have to make my distaste with Amazon known. I think Amazon is toxic for the book market, and you should not pay them money if at all possible. So, with my disclaimer and disapproval of their predatory business practices known, let's just talk about the show, because I really don't want to concern myself with Amazon too much in this video. I really just want to talk about the show. And my thoughts, the possibilities. Let us start with where I'm coming from. I am not a Tolkien head, Tolkien scholar by any means. I have read Lord of the Rings maybe 3 times and the Silmarillion once. And I've tried to read Lost Tales, didn't get very far, so I haven't really read much else Tolkien stuff. Most of my knowledge definitely comes from Google, comes from looking through the wiki, comes through maybe flipping through a book or two. I hope that I can communicate some of the knowledge that I have and I've discovered to you guys so that you guys can have a better understanding of the possibilities of, fun stuff. Let's start with what we know. Now, if you are a Tolkien scholar, I will be saying a lot of things that you probably already know. If I get anything wrong, please feel free to correct me. I am fine with that, as long as you're being respectful and not a douchebag. Please don't be a douchebag. There are timestamps down below, or chapters will be on this video, of what is rumored, what we know, what I hope for specifically, and a few other things. So check out that if you just want to skip around a little bit. That being said, let's talk about what we know. So first of all, it takes place during the Second Age. Basic information that's been trumpeted everywhere. What is the Second Age? That's easy. The Second Age started with the founding of the Grey Havens on the northwestern side of Middle-earth. A little bit after that, about 30 years or so, Numenor was founded, and this will be important later. Numenor is important throughout the Second Age. And the Second Age ended with the last battle of the last alliance of elves and men. We see this at the beginning of Peter Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring, when Isildur takes the ring, cuts the ring off from the hand of Sauron, takes the ring and does not destroy it.
Cast it into the fire! Destroy it! No. Isildur!
Numenor had previously fallen a few years earlier due to Numenorians generally just being douchey. There are a lot of reasons why. Some of it was them were being manipulated, but in general they were just being douchey and trying to invade the elves of the Undying Lands. But sadly, Numenor fell between the waves. What else do we know? Well, obviously it has something to do with the Rings of Power, which Sauron deceived the elves to forge, and then he forged the One Ring himself. The Second Age takes place over a period of about 3,300, 3,400 years. So there's a lot of time there. The rings were forged around 1,500, and then the One Ring was forged around 1,600. During this time, Sauron was deceiving the elves, and Celebrimbor, who will be important later, forged the three elven rings apart from Sauron, which led to them having less influence from Sauron, I believe, even though they were still influenced by Sauron because reasons. There are 3 main locations that we've been told about from the synopsis, and that is the Misty Mountains, which gives us hope for the dwarves, the elf capital of Lindon, which I don't exactly remember where it was. I believe it was in a region. It was in the northwestern side of the region. And then the last part would be the island of Numenor, which is sunk into the sea now by the time we get to the end of the Third Age, which is when the events of Lord of the Rings happen. What else do we know about casting? There have a lot of people we've been told about being cast. I'm not going to go through their names, but the notable ones that we know who they've been cast. Sir Lenny Henry has been cast as a hobbit, so we are getting hobbits, and notably from the Harfoot clan. This is the main clan that settled the Shire, from my knowledge, along with 2 other clans of hobbits. And I believe it's been rumored that they're hobbit refugees, which is an interesting concept. And I would love to see what they're refugees from. It opens up for a lot of speculation. The other person that's been cast is a young Galadriel, which is dope. We have Morvith Clark as our Galadriel. I think it is presumed that the voiceover for the Rings of Power teaser that is linked down below is Morvith. I think, just simply because that is tradition, because we have our lovely Cate Blanchett as Galadriel in the movies, doing the voiceover at the very beginning of Fellowship. So that's about all we actually know. There's a bunch of other rumors that I know about, but when I was looking around, I really didn't find any confirmation for these. And that is that there will be more than one main character, and 2 of the main characters that we know about are Isildur, or has been heavily rumored, are Isildur and Celebrimbor. Now, Isildur is the one who eventually destroys Sauron's body at the end of the Second Age by cutting the One Ring off of his finger and then taking it for himself. He was born around 3200, I believe. Yes, and he died shortly into the Third Age. Celebrimbor has an indeterminate time of birth, basically during the First Age at some point, which was a while, and he died around 1697 in the Second Age, so about halfway through. He died during a major war with Sauron, the War of Sauron and the Elves. So Celebrimbor was the smith that primarily made the Rings of Power. Him and a few other ones. And he specifically made the 3 Elven Rings of Power, using the methods that Sauron taught the elves. With Celebrimbor and Isildur as main characters, that opens up for a lot of fun things. So let's get into what I hope for, what I think this show will be about, what I want to see in this show, which I have some thoughts on, and then overall how I think the show will go. So, I think the first thing, that if we have Celebrimbor as a main character, we will definitely see the forging of the rings. If not that, we are then definitely, at the very least, it will be a flashback sequence. Because the rings are forged in 1500. The war of the Sauron and the elves did not happen until 1693. And the One Ring itself was forged in 1600. They may gloss over this a little bit and just go straight into the war, or they may give us an entire sequence of Sauron seducing the elves, not only seducing them, but like deceiving them and convincing them to make the rings. So they made a total of 19 rings, and then Sauron made the 20th, which was the One Ring. 16 of those rings were for men and for dwarves, and then the very last 3 were the ones that Celebrimbor made, apart from Sauron, as I said. They were still influenced by Sauron, but to a lesser extent because of him not being there. Unclear. To that effect, I would love to see the war of Sauron and elves to come together. It definitely has the potential for some really grittiness, honestly, because Celebrimbor's death is not a clean thing. He was tortured constantly after he was captured, and then his body was impaled and used as a banner in one of the later battles. So it's pretty gruesome. It's a lot. I think we will see that war at the very least. The next thing I would like to see is the corruption of the Nazgul. So what we know about the Nazgul, they first appeared in around 2200, 2215 to be exact. And this is after Sauron got the rings back, because at some point Celebrimbor hid all of the rings except the One Ring. But the only 3 did not reveal the location of Sauron when he was under torture, were the 3 elven rings. The corruption of the Nazgul, the corruption of the dwarves as well, because the dwarves also received 7 rings, but they did not become ring wraiths. Instead, it is stated that, I believe, it said that essentially the rings gave the dwarves an overmuch greed for gold, more than they had. So that kind of contributed to the decline of the dwarven civilization, and you can see more of that greed in some of the dwarves of the Hobbit, specifically I would say Thorin. That is something that definitely was corrupted into them. And it would be interesting to see, because the dwarves a good movie adaptation of dwarves and dwarven culture. You could say The Hobbit helped, but like we haven't really seen a lot of that, despite The Hobbit. And The Hobbit was interesting. In the Second Age, Sauron just in general does a lot of corrupting. And that honestly is probably the biggest thing that we will see is Sauron on a big screen, and he's not going to be in his big black armor because Sauron is actually a shapeshifter. It wasn't until after the fall of Numenor that he lost his ability to, quote unquote, shift into a fairer form. And that's why he's in that big armor in the movies. He's technically there, not really in the eye, because that wasn't a physical thing in the books, but it was good imagery. So Sauron actually at one point deceived the elves, even though they knew kind of like who Sauron was. He went under a pseudonym. And then we also have him deceiving the Númenóreans, which would be the main storyline around Isildur. So Isildur is born, whenever I say he was born, like 3200 or whatever. Shortly thereafter, the Númenórean king is like, Sauron, you're no threat. We're going to invade you. Oh, wait, you're going to surrender? We're going to take you back as a hostage to Númenor. Worst decision of all time. The Númenóreans were then corrupted by Sauron, to the point that Sauron became a priest of Morgoth to this blood cult that he essentially created in Númenor. They did some crazy stuff. The Númenóreans were also on rocky relationship with the elves, and in general they were just being douchebags, partially to the influence of Sauron. But they'd been douchebags before, specifically trying to break away from the elves and just not thinking, being like, you elves think you're so much better than us, but we're such a great society. Yeah, that's basically my impression of the Númenóreans. They stopped speaking Elvish. They stopped dealing with the elves at some point. And Sauron kind of used this against them. Eventually, Númenor tried to invade the Undying Lands, but was destroyed. And that's where you have the foundation of Gondor and Rohan and all these other and there was another one, Arnor, that was in the north. This is how these places came about. So we could see the fall, will see the fall of Númenor, the foundation of the human kingdoms from the Númenorian refugees. It's going to be very interesting. I think that would be like a season 2 or a season 3 thing, depending on how many seasons they do, or even a season 5 thing, because of just how things go. I think it's already obvious that if we have Isildur and Celebrimbor as main characters, this show is going to have really wonky timelines, and that's something to look out for and pay attention to. From what I've heard, The Witcher also does some fucky thing with some timelines, and it's not very clear, so that's definitely something to watch out for on Amazon's part. They need to try to do better with the timelines. Other things I would like, I would really like to see Ents. So I was looking into the Ents. I think the Ents are great. I would love to see more of the Ents. The things we know about the Ents, they used to be shepherds of vast, vast forests. And the forest reached from where Fanghorn is now, in the Third Age, all the way to the shores of the Grey Havens in the west. So Elrond actually makes a comment in the book that at one point a squirrel could go from Rivendell to the Grey Havens without touching the ground. Like from the Misty Mountains all the way to the coast. Which is kind of crazy. All of these forests were cut down in the Second Age by the Númenóreans being douchebags and by Sauron's war with the elves. So I think if we do see the war of Sauron and the elves, which includes the elves, Sauron, the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, which actually tells us why they, shut the doors of Khazad-dûm, but also includes the Númenóreans and could include the Ents. Like, it's very unclear. The Ents' history is very murky, so they have a lot of room to wiggle there. The other thing that we don't know about is when the Entwives left. One of the big things about the Ents is they had Entwives, but the Entwives got fed up with them and left. It is said they went west or east. They went east across the Anduin River to the place between the Sea of Rhûn and Mirkwood that is now called the Brown Lands, which Sauron destroyed during the last alliance of men and elves at the end of the Second Age. So it is presumed that they just wiped out. They could also be in, could also be some left in the Shire, but that is just superstition on the part of the hobbits, possibly. We don't know. Tolkien left this unsolved. On purpose, might I add. Hobbits, definitely. I would love to see more hobbits, and we're going to see some hobbits. I didn't really do much research into the hobbit history, other than I know the Shire was founded during the Third Age, I believe. I could be wrong. I don't know that much hobbit history off the top of my head. Even though we have a lot of it. But most of it's by Shire reckoning, which only goes about 1100 years. But we're definitely going to see more hobbits, which is another, like, piece of history that past, like, the Shire reckoning history we get in the appendices, I don't think we have that much at all. Because the hobbits aren't mentioned until the Third Age, essentially. There's a lot of potential with this show. That's kind of what I would like to see. There's so many things that they go into. But out of all the ages, this is the one that is the most light in terms of what Sauron put. There's kind of there's a general template that Tolkien wrote, but there aren't that many specific stories that he wrote. Much like with the Third Age, there's a lot of very specific things. The First Age and the Third Age, I think there was a lot of specific things that he wrote about. So as adaptions go, this is a very different one because the writers have a lot more freedom, and they could screw it up or they could do really well with it. The thing we do know is that the show will not contradict canon per the Tolkien estate, although there's some weird wiggle room with things like Galadriel's story. In Tolkien's letters and everything, from what I know, Galadriel and her husband's story is contradicted multiple times. Like, it's told multiple times because Tolkien changed his mind about how he wanted to go. I'm sure there's probably a final version that you could argue that XYZ is a final version, but they could choose multiple different versions of the story to use. So some of the things they definitely have wiggle room on, and that makes it different from adaptations like The Witcher and Wheel of Time. Because Wheel of Time, they had to change things because it would not have made a good show otherwise. And even now, debatably, it's not the best show for a lot of people. I personally have not watched it, and I have personally not completed Wheel of Time, so I am unable to say. But a lot of people didn't like it from what I heard. The Witcher is kind of hit or miss. Some people liked it, some people didn't. It's also, like, not exactly to the books. But I think this is different because there's writings. Yes, there are writing. But there are no hugely specific stories. Like, we know the war happened, and we know 1, 2, 3, or 4 things happened during the war. Like, Rivendell was founded. But we don't know exactly what the campaign was like. We don't know the back and forth. There is free reign to create here. We know that there was a battle of Grey Havens. We know that Celebrimbor died in this battle after he was tortured and put on a stake. As long as they stick to some of those general details, they can do what they want. This venture has the possibility of being really good or really bad. I don't know which it will be. I am apprehensive due to just general hype in the past has disappointed a lot of people, so I'm definitely on the, it could be good, but we'll see. But I'm definitely going to watch it. So that's my thoughts. If there's anything you want to see in the show, let me know down below. Are there specific storylines that you would really like to see? Are there specific events that you're really looking forward to see? Just let me know. And of course, if I got anything wrong, let me know. I'm really self-conscious about that, honestly. But please be polite. And if other people get things wrong, just don't be a douchebag. It's kind of simple. Everybody have a great day. And just remember to get some rest because that is important.